Hey, what's going on, everybody? I've had a lot of people request that I do a video on how I process my astrophotography. So today we're going to go over some narrowband imaging processing. I'll probably do a video later on actually doing visible light processing, which is a different process a little bit, on at least how I handle it. I'm not saying the things that I'm going to go over are the right or wrong way to do it. It's just how I personally do it. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to go over is what software am I actually using. So I actually only use two pieces of software when I'm doing narrowband imaging. I use Adobe Photoshop and Deep Sky Stacker. This is a free program that you can just Google and you can find that. Adobe Photoshop is a paid subscription based program, but they're both great programs. So the first thing we'll do is we'll pull up Deep Sky Stacker. We actually need to bring in some photos that I've taken. So I've actually got some loaded up here already. Got the North American Nebula. So for those of you who don't know, I do image in monochrome. So we are going to be taking a series of monochrome images and turning them into a color image as we go through this process. The first thing we'll do is we'll select all of our hydrogen alpha frames, which is a filter that I'm using. So actually, just so you guys know, this is the filter set I'm using when I'm doing narrowband imaging. It's a three-piece set. We have a sulfur 2, a hydrogen alpha, and a oxygen 3. If I can highlight it, oxygen 3 narrowband filter set. If you come down here to show the cues of what spectra is actually letting through, you have around the 500 nanometer wavelength, around the 660 and what 680-ish area. So that this is obviously, not obviously, but from 400 to about 700 is the visible light, what we'd consider visible light. So we're cutting out a lot of the visible light. I mean, this is all we're letting through with these three separate filters, and then we'll take each one of these separate filters and assign them a color channel and then use that to make a false color image. That's what we're basically doing here. So let me go back into Deep Sky Stacker. So we're going to bring in all of our hydrogen alpha data, which is one single filter. So let's open all those. Once those come in, you can click on one, and you can look. There's really not a lot you can see here, but here in a bit we'll stretch the histogram of the photo and you'll actually be able to see some things. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight all these, and then we're going to check them, because you actually have to check which frames you want to use. We want to use all of them in this particular case. The next thing you need to do for alignment process is you have to select a frame of reference. Typically, my mount doesn't track off too far from where I start, so a lot of times I just go with the first frame and I tell it to use that as a reference frame. So as it's doing the alignment, it's going to take this frame and it's going to say, okay, move all the other frames so that the stars are in the same position as this one. So that the whole reason we're doing this stacking is to eliminate any noise in the photo, or not any, but most of the noise in the photo. It's going to go through each frame, and it's going to kind of compare pixel by pixel and try to determine what's real signal and what is noise. So it's going to bring our signal to noise ratio down substantially and actually going to rebuild the image pixel by pixel. So now we have all of what we call our light frames, which are the actual frames that have the target data in them. So the next thing we need are calibration frames. We have a couple of those. So the ones I use are dark frames, flat frames, and offset or bias frames, or whatever you want to call them. So dark file frames, what these are, you take photos at the exact same exposure settings as your lights, but you put the lens cap on. I know that sounds weird, but the reason you're doing that is you're trying to determine what kind of noise is in your image when there's no signal present at all. Like, what noise is always there, because obviously that needs to be eliminated. You need to eliminate that noise. So that's the first thing you need to subtract from the photo. So I've actually already stacked some of these. So I actually have some master frames here that are already stacked. So I'll just select my master. So I have a master 300-second, and I can see here that these are 300-second photos. So I'll bring that master in for my dark. Then I should be able to do the same thing for a flat file. Flat file is taken with the camera pointed at a flat surface. I use the daytime sky with a white t-shirt stretched over the lens. And what you do is you take a photo that tries to get the histogram in the middle of the photo. So you're kind of getting an evenly saturated photo. And what you're doing here is you're trying to see any vignetting, or maybe there's some dust or some moisture spots on your camera lens or your telescope lens or your camera sensor, or any kind of weird dust or just dark spots, bright spots in your photo, and just trying to change the brightness and get a real nice even flat image, hence why we call them flats. So I don't know if I have a master flat. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, I have a master flat right there. So we're going to bring that in. And then same thing, bias is we're actually taking a photo as fast as the camera can go with a lens cap on again. And what this photo is doing is it's actually trying to determine what kind of electrical noise is always present in the sensor as well. Whereas the dark is actually saying what noise is present when you take long exposure photography and at a certain temperature. The bias is saying what noise is pretty much just here all the time, what's always there. So we're going to select this master bias and bring that in. So now that we have all these in, we can begin the process of what's called registering. So we'll register the check pictures. And then we need to, what registering is doing is actually going through and finding all the stars in the photos and determining what it needs to do for alignment. Like what do I need to do to align all these pictures and get them all lined up with each other? So first thing we're going to do is compute how many stars we can detect in the photos. So I found 93 stars. I like to adjust my threshold, so I'm somewhere between 50 and 100. I would say 93 is pretty good. If you get too many stars in there, it's a good indication that you're picking up noise and you're trying to align noise, and you may get some stacking artifacts because it's actually trying to align with things that aren't consistent in the image like stars will be. So we're going to hit OK on this. And it brings up a little data here to tell you what's going on. So we have 45 or an hour and 45 minutes of total exposure time. Asking what stacking algorithms do I want to use. This is a little deeper than I want to get in with the scope of this video. So we're just going to say, okay, stack them or register them. So we'll let this register, and I'll come back when this is done, and we'll move on to the next process. Okay, so we are done registering, and we're actually done stacking as well. I lied in that last little segment there. I just totally forgot that I had a setting checked to, after register, just go ahead and stack. And that's why that second dialog came up, and that should have been obvious to me, but hey, we all do stupid things sometimes. So it's actually, we're registered and the photos are actually stacked. Just went through pixel by pixel, done its best to determine what's noise and what's real signal. And as you can see now, it's been able to partially stretch the histogram a little bit and brought out a little bit of data here. We've got some stars and we got a little nebulosity showing up here. And if we kind of take our histogram here and we stretch it just a little bit more and hit apply, we can see a lot more data is coming out now. So we definitely have some good data here. This is just hydrogen alpha, like I said before. So if we go back to our little reference here, let's see, hydrogen alpha is in the red. So it's just this range right here. This is all the light we're letting through. So let's, I think I have another thing pulled up here. So you can see 600 to 700 is between orange and red. So we go back here, we're somewhere around the 660 mark. So we're in kind of in the red region. a very small region of the red. And actually, why they refer to it as hydrogen alpha is this is a particular spectrum that when hydrogen becomes ionized, it emits this color light. So hence hydrogen alpha. So that is why it's referred to as that. Anyway, going back to this photo, this photo is pretty much done, at least this portion of it. So what we'll do is we will save this picture to a file. I'm going to make a new folder here called video. We'll come in here and we'll just call it NAN, North American Nebula, and we'll hydrogen alpha. So save that out. So now we're going to go back to opening some picture files here. And we are going to, first of all, let's cancel this. And I'm going to take everything. You can see this asterisk here. That is my reference frame. So I'm going to take everything that's a light frame. And I'm going to uncheck that. Actually, I need to uncheck the reference frame as well. But we're going to leave this reference frame here because even though we're going to move on to another filter and another spectrum, we still want them to align to this frame so that when we stack them all together to try to make a color image, they're all still aligned and we don't have to do any manual alignment in Photoshop later. So now we're going to open a set of oxygen 2 or oxygen 3 frames. I have 21 of those as well. So we'll pull those in. So let's find those in the list. They're down here. So now we'll go through and we'll check all of these and make sure none of the hydrogen alphas are checked because we do not want those stacked in this session. But we, like I said, we still do want this frame to be the reference. So it's not checked, but it is the reference. So it won't use it in the stacking process, but it will use it in the registering process to align the stars. So I think we're good here. So let's register the check pictures. Let's compute how many stars we have here. 151. Let's bump up our threshold a little bit. I hate how sensitive that is. It just flies up on you. We might have to take this all the way to the top. Oh, 0 stars. Too much, too much. Let's try 97. 133 is the best we're going to get. So let's, okay. See, it even says stacking step. I don't know how I missed that last time. It says stacking step. So these are my stacking settings. So once again, we're going to okay this, let it stack. And then we'll be back when we are ready to move on to the sulfur 2. All right, so we're done stacking the O3 data. And you can see that as much detail didn't come out by default as the last set. There's just not as much oxygen 3 data in the North American Nebula as there is hydrogen alpha. So once again, we can take a little stretch on our histogram here and apply. You can see there is something there. Just there's not as much contrast as the hydrogen alpha. That's why I love hydrogen alpha. It's just a lot of really good contrast in that particular filter in that spectrum. So you can see that there's some black along the edge here on the right edge and the bottom edge. That is from the stacking process. You know, obviously my mount did drift a little bit, so it had to shift everything over to make it in line with the hydrogen alpha data. So what it does there is it leaves a black void, and we'll crop all this out in Photoshop once we get it all aligned. We'll get rid of all these stacking artifacts, and shouldn't be a problem after we do that. So now we can move on to the sulfur 2 data. I'm not going to show you the whole stacking process. I don't think you guys really care about seeing it again. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to stack the sulfur 2 data. Then we're going to move on to Photoshop. And I'm going to show you how we begin that whole process in Photoshop of getting them all aligned with each other. Or not all of them color assigned with each other. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'll get back with you. Okay, first of all, I'm over here now. Hi. I had to move myself over a little bit because everything that's important in Photoshop I have on the right side of the screen right now. And that's actually going to drive me crazy that everything is on one screen because I'm not used to working that way. But, you know, I do it because I care about you and I want you to be able to see things, and I sacrifice my own mental health for you. So anyway, you probably can see that you can't see all the nice, pretty data once I've brought all these images into Photoshop, but like we saw in the Deep Sky Stacker. And the reason for that is Deep Sky Stacker does a temporary stretch of the histogram just so you can see what data is there, and you can kind of make decisions on how you maybe want to change your stack settings, or maybe you don't like the way things are looking quite right. And then once you actually save it out, it kind of puts everything back at the, you know, just kind of puts the histogram back as is. And then, you know, later in another processing software, you stretch it yourself. So we have all of our, hydrogen alpha, our oxygen 3, and our sulfur 3 in Photoshop. And first thing we need to do once we get into Photoshop is we need to stretch this image again. We need to get that data out. So let's go ahead, and what I like to do is I like to, first of all, unlock the background layer. And then I like to duplicate the layer. That way, if I screw it up, I can fix it. So let's go ahead and image, adjustments, and we're going to adjust the levels. So we are going to take this and we are going to stretch this histogram. And it kind of looks pretty crappy when you first start doing it here. And I'm going to try to figure out where I like it. And you can kind of go by this histogram over here and kind of look at things and see what you think. I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK on that. And now we got a better view of it here. So I'm going to probably go ahead and go for another stretch. I like to do my stretches in like a sequential stepping process. Try not to stretch it all at once because it's such a small histogram at first that it's really hard to get precise. And if you do a series of smaller stretches, you can be a little more precise about what you're trying to do. So we're going to go do that again. And we're going to, that might be a little much. So we're going to kind of clip this bottom off a little bit here. And I have a bad habit of typically editing towards the dark side. I normally have to fix that later. Maybe I just don't have my monitors calibrated properly, but so okay, I kind of like that. I'm gonna go with that. I'm not too mad at that histogram. You know, we kind of got a spike towards the middle here, so you know, right or wrong, it's what I do. So what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna do that similar thing. I'm gonna try to get this similar, you know, level in my histogram over here in the top right. I'm gonna go through and do that with the other two filters here with the oxygen 3 and the sulfur 2. So I'm probably going to speed the video up during that process, and we're going to just go ahead and get that done real quick. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have them all stretched. I'm pretty happy with them. We have our hydrogen alpha, our oxygen 3, and our sulfur 2. Little full disclosure here for anyone watching the clock. I kind of screwed up the whole process. Had to do a little cut there, come back, fix them all. Yeah, I got a little mad, walked away, came back. We're good now. Anyway, I like what I got going on here. There's a little more noise than I would typically like in the sulfur 2, but we'll deal with that later. We'll be able to handle that. Nothing I'm scared of. So what we do from here is I normally like to start with the hydrogen alpha, and I'll go ahead and I'll save this as a Photoshop file. I've already got one here, so we're gonna call it NAN video. And we'll say OK. And give it a minute to save here. All right, so normally I will come over here to my Oxygen 2, and we will Control A to select all, Control C to copy. I'll go back to my hydrogen alpha channel here, and then you go to channels. And if you know anything about Photoshop, you know what the channels are. But if you don't, then it shows you where your red, green, and blue channels are. And you can see here it only shows gray, and that's because we're in the wrong setting here, because this is a monochrome image to start off with. So we need to go to Image, Mode, RGB Color. It's going to ask if we want to merge all the channels, and well, I mean they're all merge all the layers, which we're okay with that because we only have 2 layers and they're exactly the same. So we're going to say OK. Now that we have these red, green, and blue channels available, we could take that Oxygen 3 that we just copied from the other file, and we can highlight the blue channel and paste that in. So now we've assigned Oxygen 3 to the blue channel. Now I'll go to Sulfur 2. I'll do the same thing, Control A, Control C. Come over here. I like to assign Sulfur 2 to the red channel. And I will do the same thing, highlight red, paste it in. And now when we go to our RGB, we have a color image, just like that. So you can kind of hide different channels and see what's going on here. So anyway, that's how we take monochrome and turn it into color. So this is not the final image by any stretch of the imagination. So a lot of times I will, and actually the first time I recorded this, I will adjust too heavy. I will put too much contrast in the hydrogen alpha. I'm going to show you guys what that kind of looks like. So actually first we'll look at the histogram here, and we'll switch it to colors. So you can see your histogram. This is what you want when you start a narrowband image. Once you actually put all the merge all the channels together and make a color image, you want a good bit of gray, and you want to see all these colors relatively aligned with each other. Now they are a little to the left because we have, our image is a little dark. We do need to bring that a little more to the center and get a little more center aligned histogram to get a good brightness in our photo. But a lot of times, like I said, the hydrogen alpha will have a lot more contrast in it because there's just a lot more signal in that photo. So a lot of times you'll get a really overwhelmed green channel because that's what we assign the hydrogen alpha to. So I'm going to kind of emulate that a little bit real quick with the levels here. So I'll go to green, and I will drag this. So a lot of times it'll come in, and this isn't quite right of what it'll look like, but a lot of times you'll get something that looks a little like this. And all you want to do is just, so if you watch your histogram over here, you can see the green's way spiked, way higher than everything else. So what you want to do is you just want to kind of keep dialing that back until that green just lines up with everything else, or relatively lines up. You can use your scroll wheel to kind of adjust it and get it just right, how you like it. So I'm going to turn my preview off. Maybe I like what I've done better here. That's a tough one. There was a little bit of a green cast on it, but let's see. We'll start there. So now, once I have my levels where I like them, and we've got a good, this is a good basis for the image, I'll normally go back and I will actually, let's see, I still have my hydrogen alpha. So I'm going to reopen the hydrogen alpha. And I should have left it, I guess I used the hydrogen alpha, so I kind of screwed that one up, but I'm bringing it back in. I'm going to stretch it again real quick. So image, adjustments, levels. We're back to working with the monochrome hydrogen alpha only. And we're going to use this I use it as my luminance layer because hydrogen alpha on this target has the best details. I really like the details. It has a lot of good contrast. So it's a really good one to use for the luminance layer. We're going to do another little stretch here. And so I actually really like to have some gray in my photos. Because when you look through a telescope eyepiece, you typically see the background as gray. You don't see it as black. So I kind of like to mimic that. And like some of the best astrophotography I see out there, that's what the guys I like, that's what they do. And I really like that style. So I try to mimic that style a little bit. So once I get this, I kind of like this. I like what we have going on here. I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to come back over here. And I'm actually going to paste it over the whole image. And then I'm going to change this layer to a luminance layer. And then I'm going to kind of dial the opacity in a little bit. And it just kind of brings the levels up a little bit and just kind of gets the tone I'm looking for, a good basis for the tone that I'm looking for here. And then a lot of times I just kind of want to make sure that's kind of what I'm like. And a lot of times I'll actually hide that for a minute. And we're going to work on the colors. I will typically take this layer, I will duplicate it. That way, when I start messing with it, I don't screw things up. I can always kind of go back to my starting point. And then I will go to Image, Adjustments. And I will adjust the selective color. Use the selective color tool to. And I'll start with the greens. And then we'll kind of play around with the cyans and the greens. And it doesn't change a whole lot. You kind of get, in this particular target, you get a little bit of change in this clouds throughout here. And you get a little bit of changes in these edges here, but not a whole lot. But I normally just start with the greens. I'm gonna put it somewhere right in there because I kind of like that being a little more yellow. And then, yeah, I don't like the haze it adds, so I'm gonna pump that magenta up to kind of give it a little more sharpness and clarity in that area. Yeah, and I like, so as far as the yellow goes, when I crank it up all the way, it kind of gives it a nasty, nasty yellow in that cloud. So I'm gonna dial it back. And it's a little more orange, and I like that better. So then we're going to hit OK. Let that take effect. And the reason I'm doing the actual, for all you Photoshop guys, the reason I'm using the adjustments menu opposed to using layers is when I use layers, it doesn't give me a true representation. It kind of gives a blotchy color to everything. And so you actually either merge all your layers or you flatten your image or you save it out to a JPEG or whatever. You can't really see your changes until then. You can see it sort of, but not in full detail. I like to see it in full detail. And you can keep making as many layers, duplicated layers, as you want to kind of make checkpoints to go back to if you want. And that's just a personal preference on how you want to do it. But so now we're going to go back to selective color. And now I'm going to work on the yellows. So we're going to kind of play around with the cyans again. I like the amber color it's given there. So I'm just going to crank those all the way down. Play around with the magenta here. Yep, I like to crank that up a little bit. I like that amber it's bringing in. Not too much, not too much. Let's go back to about 8. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, I like the yellow, but I don't like too much of it. So let's dial that back a little bit. Maybe it was good where it was at. I like it about right there, +4. That's good. Let's hit OK on that. Now let's go to adjustments again. I'll just keep doing this selective color over and over, and I kind of go through, I don't go through every channel, but I go through most of them. So we'll go to cyans, and we're going to, we're going to push those cyans up, the cyan and cyan, we're going to push that up. We're going to dial the magenta up, give us a little more of a royal blue. And I do I don't like a real heavy royal blue. I like a little bit of a green or yellow tint to it. I'm going to do a little less than I normally would do in that regard. If you guys follow me and what I would typically do with a editing session, but this is I like this. I like where this is going. We're gonna try something different today, at least color wise. Maybe not in process, but we're gonna try something different color wise. So selective color again. Now we're gonna work on the blues, and we're going to crank the cyan all the way up on the blue. And this time I'm gonna dial the magenta out of this. I don't remember what I did last time, but this time I'm gonna dial it out a little bit and get a little more even kind of hazy blue. Oh man, I keep wanting. I really want to give it that green. I'm trying to avoid it. I'm trying to do something different. We're gonna okay that. Now, I hate these purple stars. I get really annoyed with purple stars. I see a lot of photos with purple stars. Everyone out there that does astrophotography, quit doing purple stars. Stars are not purple. Okay, anyway, rant off. So now, how I do that is I go to adjustments. Once again, selective color. And then I go to my magentas. And then I dial that magenta out. Look at there. White stars. That easy. And that's pretty much all you're affecting. White stars. Crank it up, purple stars. Crank it down, white stars. Amazing. So little effort. Why are you not doing that? Anyway, the rant came back on for a minute there. Sorry. So we're okay that. Now we're going to zoom out. Let's turn this luminance layer back on. And it just, so we kind of have some noise going on. You turn this luminance layer on. It really helps. I mean, immediately helps denoise it. Maybe it's not exactly the contrast we're looking for, but it definitely helps a lot with that noise and just flattens the image out and gives a really good start to what we're looking for in a good, clean image. So now that we've color corrected it and we've applied the luminosity layer, I'm pretty happy with this. Now what we need to do is we need to crop off all this nasty stuff here. And actually, you know what? Looking at this, I don't like this red here. I don't know if I can. And actually, look, there's still a little purple in my stars. Is that only when I turn this on? Yeah. So let's. This is what I love about selective color. You can actually go back, and you can. If I can remember where that is, image adjustments, selective color. You can run that same color again, magenta, and dial it out even more. Goodbye. Goodbye, magentas. Look at those stars just looking better and better every time. Every time. Let's bring that luminance layer back in. All right, I'm liking this. And now that we're back to where we like it, we can use the crop tool. And we're going to get rid of all this nasty stacking artifact garbage. I like to use the original ratio when I do this. And then I will cut off the edges there, and I will hit enter. And there's that. I like the crop. It's a good start. So now, typically what I'll do now is, if you don't know this hotkey in Photoshop and you use Photoshop, this is a good one. I will do Control-Alt-Shift-E. And what that did is it just made another layer that's a stamp of all of these layers combined. So it merged them all and then made a stamp. It didn't merge the layers and completely erase them. It merged them and then put that as a layer on top of everything else. So at any point I can hide this, and kind of start stepping backwards. So I like that. And when it's on, you know, you can hide these underneath and it doesn't affect anything because it's covering those layers up. So just nice, another little non-linear way you can process and not really screw your stuff up. So now that we've got our color corrected and everything, I will start using layers at this point, adjustment layers, and I will bring in a vibrance layer, and I will kind of adjust the vibrance as I see fit. Now you will start, when you adjust vibrance and saturation, I don't like to use saturation because it's a little heavy-handed. I like to use the vibrance. It's a little more subtle, but it will reintroduce noise, color noise into your image. But we'll fix that later with denoising and despeckling and things like that. But just so you know, it will reintroduce that into your image. So let's see. I typically get too heavy. I mean, you can go all the way up and that gets a really heavy image. Some people may like that, but to me it starts getting a pretty unnatural look. So I'm going to dial it back to somewhere around in there. And then we're going to add a curves layer. I'm just going to add a little bit of a curve there. And you can see I'm still kind of left heavy. Like I said, I always edit left heavy. I don't know why, but it's just something I do. Maybe one day I'll change it, but for now, I guess I'm just going to be making dark images. I'm kind of, yeah, we're going to play around with this black level a little bit to see what kind of, I like it down. It brings out a lot of this dust down here. I think this red here is from my sensor. I don't know. It may be gases, but I think it's from my sensor. I could do some masking layers and get rid of that, but a little out of the scope of what I'm wanting to do here. And typically I just leave things like that in my images, and it doesn't, for me personally, it doesn't ruin it. There's some people that get really obsessive about those sorts of things, but I'm personally okay with it. So let's see if we can't move this out of the way a little bit here. Let's zoom in here. So there's all these little dots. I don't know how well you can see them. I'm not talking about the stars. I'm talking about all these little things between the stars. All this, you see blue, and then you see like a pinkish tone, gray tones, things like that. And the despeckle tool is actually pretty good for removing that. We're going to filter, go back and do the noise, despeckle. Woo! That did take some clarity away. But on the overall, not too shabby. Yeah, not terrible. I mean, we'll fix that with some sharpening later, and we'll reintroduce our own noise that we find appropriate that actually helps the image. So once again, we'll go to layer, we'll go to filter, we'll go to noise, we'll reduce the noise. Oh yeah, we're gonna get pretty blurry here. I don't think we want to go that strong. I was obviously working with some pretty serious stuff. And what makes this tool great for me is this reduced color noise. So I'm gonna turn this preview off. So you can see all this color noise. Turn the preview back on. Gone. Beautiful. Love that. Oh, let's go the other way. Let's zoom out a little bit. So you probably can't see that on Facebook or YouTube or whatever you're watching this on, but it really just helps clean up a lot of those weird colors all throughout it. I'm going to zoom back in here, and I'm going to sharpen the details a little bit. I'm kind of careful with this because you get some weird ugliness in there if you're not too careful. We're going to hit OK on this. Let that run. And it takes a second here. There we go. So this is looking pretty good. I'm pretty well liking this. So now, and sometimes I will get masking layers out, and I will sharpen only specific parts of the image, like maybe just sharpen these clouds here, or these little dust lanes and stuff. Not really clouds or dust lanes, but I'm this a little out of the scope, and it's not something I do very often, so I don't really want to get into that. Now we're going to go to filter. We're going to kind of do the opposite of what we're doing. We're going to sharpen stuff, which reintroduces noise. But we're going to use Smart Sharpen. I find it works pretty well for not adding too much noise. I mean, it definitely adds some, but it's not enough to ruin the image or anything like that. It's just enough to give it that edge. So let's crank that up a little bit and kind of bring those stars back to their... Stars is where I notice over sharpening the most. Like I see a lot of stars that don't, like these stars look like nice little, what we refer to as airy disc. It just looks like a little disc of, nice little faintness on the edges. And even right now, like if I zoom in, there's like a little halo, or not a halo, but there's a little white, like solid white dot that's surrounded by this halo of like an orb glowing or something. And that just tells me it's a little too sharp. It's a little too sharp. I want to dial it back, and I want a more even, smooth star. I think I like it right there. And once again, you might not even be able to see this on whatever video platform you're watching it on, but it's definitely something that annoys me, so I have to deal with it. So overall, I think this is my picture, at least for this video. I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. That was the basic rundown and process of how I would go about starting with monochrome data, stacking it to remove noise and get the signal to noise ratio down, so that when I stretch the histogram, it's a relatively clean image. And then how I take those images, combine them in different color channels, and make a full color image that is a false color. I chose these colors, so this is just a false color representation of the different ionized gases that make up this nebula. So there is a little bit of artistic approach, or creative. You have a little creative control there on how you want to present it. This is actually called Hubble palette. The color channels I chose with each specific filter. It's similar to what they use for the Hubble Space Telescope. So that is just something I like to do. But this is the final product here, at least for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments if you like what I'm doing, and if you want to see more. And if you do want to see more, what do you want to see? So clear skies, everyone, and have a good one.